A millionaire accused his nanny of stealing his ring, but the truth behind the theft shocked him. Before we begin, tell us in the comments who you think is the real thief in this story. And at the end, don't forget to rate the story from lean to 0. Enjoy. Elijah Vance lived his life behind walls. Not literal walls, though his sprawling Seattle mansion had plenty of those, but walls of suspicion built brick by brick from a lifetime of betrayals. He was a man who had everything: a tech empire, a portfolio that could rival a small country's GDP, and a name that opened every door. But trust? That was a currency he had long since declared bankrupt. His world revolved around two things: his work and his 6-year-old daughter, Lily. Lily was his sun, his moon, and his entire solar system. She was the one exception to his cold, calculated existence. He loved her with a fierce, protective instinct that was both profound and tragically distant. He provided for her, shielded her, and ensured her world was one of perfect, sterile safety. But he rarely played with her. He didn't know how. Warmth was a language he had forgotten how to speak. This was why finding the right nanny had been a year-long nightmare. He'd been through 7 of them. Each came with glowing recommendations, and left after a few months, unable to break through the quiet sadness that surrounded the little girl. They were professionals, but they were not what Lily needed. Then, 3 months ago, Amelia Hayes had walked into their lives. On paper, she was the least qualified candidate. No fancy degree, no long list of wealthy families on her resume. She was quiet, unassuming, with kind, observant eyes and hands that seemed to know how to fix things, whether it was a broken toy or a scraped knee. Elijah had hired her out of sheer desperation, fully expecting it to be another temporary arrangement. He was wrong. From his home office, he would watch them. He saw how Amelia didn't just watch Lily, she saw her. She didn't talk down to her, she entered her world. They built magnificent forts out of couch cushions, held elaborate tea parties for a guest list of stuffed animals, and had a secret handshake that ended with wiggling their noses. Lily, who was often quiet and withdrawn around him, blossomed under Amelia's care. Her laughter, a sound Elijah cherished but rarely caused, now echoed through the cold, marble halls of the mansion. He found it both comforting and deeply unsettling. A part of him was grateful. Another, more cynical part, the part that had been forged in the fires of deceit, was suspicious. No one was that good. No one was that selfless. Everyone eventually wanted something. He was just waiting for the other shoe to drop. The object of his deepest mistrust and his most sacred memory was kept in his study. On a pedestal of polished mahogany, under a thick glass dome, rested his mother's engagement ring. It wasn't a gaudy, ostentatious diamond like the ones he saw at charity galas. It was a vintage piece, an exquisite sapphire surrounded by a delicate halo of smaller diamonds. It was a symbol of the one true, uncomplicated love he had ever witnessed, the love between his parents, before his mother's illness took her too soon. One afternoon he found Lily and Amelia in the study, looking at the ring. "It's beautiful," Lily whispered, her small nose almost pressed against the glass. "It is," Amelia agreed, her voice soft. "It looks like a captured piece of the night sky." Elijah stepped into the room, and both of them started slightly. "That was my mother's," he said, his voice softer than usual. "My father gave it to her on the day he proposed. He said her eyes were the same color as the stone." "That's so romantic," Lily sighed. "It was," Elijah agreed, a rare melancholic smile touching his lips. "It's the most valuable thing in this house." He looked directly at Amelia when he said it, a subtle but clear warning. Amelia met his gaze without flinching. "It's not the monetary value that makes it precious," she said quietly. "It's the story." Her perception, as always, disarmed him. She saw the sentiment, not the price tag. For a moment his walls wavered. Then he remembered the lessons life had taught him, and the walls went back up, higher and thicker than before. The day the world fell apart started like any other. Elijah was on a series of back-to-back video conferences, a digital marathon of numbers and negotiations. Amelia had taken Lily to the park. When they returned, Lily was unusually quiet, her face a little pale. "Sakan, are you feeling all right, sweetie?" Amelia asked, checking her forehead. "My tummy hurts a little," Lily murmured, leaning against Amelia's side. "Let's get you into bed for a little rest," Amelia said, her voice full of a gentle concern that made Elijah pause his meeting to watch them from his office monitor. He saw Amelia tuck Lily into bed, read her a story, and place a cool cloth on her forehead. She was a natural, too natural. Later that evening, after Lily had fallen asleep, Amelia quietly entered the study. She had told Elijah she was just tidying up before leaving for the night. He saw her on the security feed, dusting the shelves, arranging the books. He saw her pause in front of the glass dome, looking at the ring. Then she turned her back to the camera, her body blocking the view of the pedestal for a few seconds. When she turned back, she finished her work and left the room. Elijah didn't think anything of it. The next morning, he walked into the study with his first cup of coffee, a daily ritual to look at the ring and remember his mother. He stopped dead. The glass dome was in its place, but underneath it, the velvet pedestal was empty. The ring was gone. Panic, cold and sharp, gripped him. He tore the study apart, looking under the desk, behind the curtains, in the drawers. Nothing. He ran to his security monitors and replayed the footage from the night before. He watched Amelia enter. He watched her dust. He watched her stand in front of the ring. He watched her turn, her body obscuring the camera's view. And he watched her leave. She was the only person who had entered the study since he was last in there. The conclusion was as swift as it was brutal. The kindness, the laughter with Lily, the gentle understanding, it was all an act. A long, carefully orchestrated con. She had played him, earned his trust, lulled his suspicions, and then, when the moment was right, she had struck, taking the one thing she knew mattered most to him. The cynical part of him roared to life, vindicated. "See? I told you. They all want something. They're all the same." He stormed through the mansion, his face a thundercloud of fury. He found Amelia in the kitchen, preparing Lily's breakfast, as if nothing had happened. "Where is it?" he demanded, his voice dangerously low. Amelia turned, surprised by his tone. "Where is what, Mr. Vance?" "Don't play dumb with me," he snarled, stepping closer. "The ring, my mother's ring. It's gone, and you were the only one in the study last night." The color drained from Amelia's face. I don't know what you're talking about. I would never." "Wouldn't you?" he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You're just like all the others. You see the money, the opportunity, and you take it. I should have known. That whole story about your family, your struggles. Was any of it even true, or was it all just a performance to make me lower my guard?" The accusation hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Amelia stared at him, her eyes wide with a hurt so profound it was like a physical blow. She opened her mouth to speak, to defend herself, but then she closed it. She seemed to realize, in that instant, that there was nothing she could say. He had already judged her. He had already convicted her. Her expression changed. The hurt was still there, but it was now veiled by a quiet, unbreakable wall of dignity. "I didn't take your ring, Mr. Vance," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "The security footage says I—" "Then the footage is lying, or you're seeing what you want to see," she replied. The defiance even now infuriated him. "Get out," he said, his voice like ice. "You're fired. Pack your things and get out of my house." He expected tears. He expected pleading. He got neither. Amelia simply nodded, a single, heartbreakingly proud gesture. "As you wish," she said. She turned and walked out of the kitchen with her head held high. Elijah watched her go, a bitter satisfaction mixing with a strange, hollow ache in his chest. He had been right all along. He had exposed the thief. So why did it feel like he had just lost something far more valuable than a ring? The silence that descended upon the Vance mansion after Amelia's departure was not peaceful. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket. Elijah told himself it was relief. The threat had been identified and removed. His home was secure again. But the quiet felt wrong. The house, which had started to feel a little warmer, a little more alive, reverted to its former state, a cold, echoing museum of wealth. The real casualty, however, was Lily. "Where's Amelia?" she asked that first evening, her small voice a stark contrast to the cavernous dining room. She had refused to eat her dinner, pushing the perfectly cut vegetables around her plate. "She had to go away, sweetie," Elijah said, not looking up from his phone, where he was pretending to read emails. "Why, is she coming back?" "No, we'll find a new nanny, a better one." Lily's lower lip began to tremble. "I don't want a new nanny. I want Amelia." "Amelia wasn't who you thought she was," Elijah said, his voice harder than he intended. "Yes, she was. She was my friend." Lily burst into tears, a heartbreaking sound that ricocheted off the marble floors. "You made her go away. I hate you." She slid off her chair and ran from the room, her small sobs trailing behind her. Elijah was left alone at the long, empty table. He told himself it was a necessary pain. Lily was a child. She wouldn't understand the complexities of betrayal. He was protecting her. But as he sat there, the untouched food growing cold on his plate, his daughter's words echoed in his ears. "Wasd I hate you?" It was a feeling he was used to inspiring in his business rivals, not in the one person he loved more than life itself. The next few days were a special kind of hell. Elijah hired a new nanny from the most exclusive agency in Seattle. Her name was Ms. Gable, a woman with impeccable credentials and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She was professional, efficient, and completely incapable of connecting with Lily. Lily retreated into herself, becoming the quiet, sad little girl she had been before Amelia arrived. She refused to play. She barely spoke. She spent hours in her room, talking to her stuffed animals in hushed whispers. Elijah tried to reach her, buying her expensive toys, suggesting trips to the zoo. She met every attempt with a wall of silent grief. "She misses Amelia," Ms. Gable reported one afternoon, her tone professionally detached. "She keeps asking when she's coming back. Perhaps if you explain." "The situation is not a child's concern," Elijah snapped, ending the conversation. But at night, alone in his silent study, the conviction he had felt began to fray at the edges. He found himself replaying the security footage over and over. He watched Amelia stand in front of the ring, her back to the camera. It was only for a few seconds. Could she have taken it that quickly? She wasn't a professional thief. He watched her leave the room, her expression calm. There was no sign of guilt, no furtive glances. Quiet professionalism. He remembered her face when he accused her, the shock, the profound, soul-deep hurt. Liars were usually angry or defensive. Amelia had just looked broken. He tried to push the thoughts away. The evidence was circumstantial, yes, but it was all there. She was the only one with the opportunity, and people from her background, they were desperate. He knew that. He had built his empire on understanding desperation. Meanwhile, Amelia's world had collapsed again. Being fired was bad enough, but being accused of theft, of betraying a child's trust, was a wound that cut far deeper. She had left the mansion with the little money she had saved, and found a room in a boarding house in a rough part of town. The room was small and smelled of damp and defeat. She spent the first 2 days in a daze, unable to eat, unable to sleep. The image of Lily's trusting face haunted her. She missed the little girl with an intensity that was a physical ache in her chest. She had let herself care, let herself believe that maybe this time things would be different, that she had finally found a place where she belonged, a family, however unconventional, and it had all been ripped away by a man whose heart was so guarded he saw thieves in every shadow. On the third day, Amelia knew she had to pull herself together. Crying wouldn't pay the rent. She put on her most presentable clothes, a simple blouse and slacks Alex she'd bought at a thrift store, and started looking for work. Brutal, humiliating process. The story of her being fired from the Vance mansion had somehow leaked, whispered through the network of high society nannies and housekeepers. No one would hire her. "We can't take the risk," one agency owner told her bluntly. "A theft accusation, especially from someone like Elijah Vance, is a career killer." By the end of the week, her savings were gone. The boarding house owner was already giving her threatening looks. Desperation, cold and familiar, began to creep back in. She found herself walking past soup kitchens, her stomach growling, her pride warring with her hunger. One evening, huddled in a small, artisy-hour diner to escape the rain, nursing a single cup of coffee she couldn't really afford, she overheard a conversation from the booth behind her. Two women were talking about their work at a local children's hospital. "The night shift is tough," one said, "especially in the oncology ward. So many kids, not enough staff to just sit with them." "I know," the other replied. "Little Maria in room Sambalingar. She cries every night for her mom. I wish I could just stay and hold her hand, but I have 3 other patients to check on." An idea sparked in Amelia's mind. It was a long shot, but it was something. The next morning, she walked into the Seattle Children's Hospital. She didn't go to the HR department. She went directly to the volunteer services office. "I don't want a job," she told the kind elderly woman at the desk. "I want to volunteer. The night shift. I can read stories, hold hands, sit with the children who are alone. I don't need to be paid. I just need to feel useful again." The woman, a volunteer herself named Doris, looked at Amelia's simple clothes and tired eyes and saw something else, a profound well of compassion. "We don't usually take on new volunteers without a background check," Doris said gently. "I know my background might be a problem right now," Amelia admitted, her voice steady. "But I can promise you this, I would never, ever harm a child. They're the only thing in this world that's still pure." Doris studied her for a long moment, a lifetime of experience in her gaze. "The night shift is from p.m. to m. It's unpaid and exhausting. Can you handle that?" "Yes," Amelia said without hesitation. "I can." 2 weeks after Amelia had gone, the Vance mansion felt like a mausoleum. Ms. Gable, the new nanny, was technically perfect but emotionally absent. She kept Lily on a strict schedule of educational activities, nutritious meals, and early bedtimes. The child was well cared for, clean, and utterly miserable. Elijah found himself working later and later, avoiding the echoing silence of his home. The sapphire ring sat in a high-security vault at his bank, but its absence from the study pedestal was a constant, glaring reminder of what he had lost. It wasn't just the ring, it was the laughter. It was the sound of Amelia's soft humming as she worked. It was the feeling, however brief, that his house had started to feel like a home. One afternoon, his private investigator called. "Mr. Vance, we have an update on Amelia Hayes." "Did you find where she pawned the ring?" Elijah asked, his voice sharp. "No, sir. That's the thing. We've checked every pawn shop, every high-end jeweler, every underground dealer in the Pacific Northwest. The ring hasn't surfaced. It's like it vanished. Or she's holding on to it, waiting for the heat to die down." "Perhaps, sir, but there's something else. We found out where she's spending her nights." "A boarding house? A motel?" "No, sir. She's volunteering at the Seattle Children's Hospital, the night shift, in the oncology ward." Elijah was silent. The information didn't compute. A thief who had just stolen a multi-million-dollar ring wouldn't be spending her nights holding the hands of dying children for free. It made no sense. "Is that all?" he asked, his voice strained. "One more thing, sir. We looked into that family emergency she mentioned. Her younger sister, she has a severe form of cerebral palsy. Amelia has been her sole caregiver and financial support since their parents died 5 years ago. She was sending money to the care facility every week, without fail. Those payments stopped 2 weeks ago, the day after you let her go." Elijah hung up the phone, the world tilting slightly on its axis. He walked to the window of his office, staring out at the city but seeing nothing. A thief, an opportunist, or a woman so desperate to care for her disabled sister that she took on 3 jobs? A woman who, even after losing everything, chose to spend her nights comforting sick children? The walls of his certainty began to crumble, and in their place, a single horrifying thought began to grow. What if I was wrong? The flieth tear. The thought was a seed of doubt, and it grew into a tree of guilt overnight. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't work. The image of Amelia's hurt face was burned into his mind. He had accused her, humiliated her, thrown her out of his house, and all the while she was carrying burdens he couldn't even imagine. The next day he did something he hadn't done in years. He canceled all his meetings and drove to the hospital. He didn't go inside. He just sat in his car across the street, watching at Diwa M. As the sun was just beginning to rise, he saw her. Amelia walked out of the hospital, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. She looked thinner, paler, but as she walked down the street, she stopped to help an elderly man who had dropped his groceries, patiently picking up every last orange that had rolled away. Elijah watched until she disappeared into the subway station. He sat in his car for a long time, the silence filled with the crushing weight of his own misjudgment. He had been so sure, so confident in his cynical view of the world. He had built his life on the principle that everyone has a price, that everyone is out for themselves. But Amelia Hayes, she didn't fit his formula. She broke it. He drove home a different man. The fury was gone, replaced by a deep, humbling shame. The first thing he did when he walked into the mansion was go to Lily's room. She was sitting on the floor, lining up her dolls in a silent, joyless row. "Lily," he said softly, kneeling down beside her, "I made a mistake, a very big one." Lily looked up at him, her eyes guarded. "About Amelia?" "Yes, about Amelia. I was wrong to send her away." A flicker of hope appeared in the little girl's eyes. "Can she come back?" "I don't know, sweetie," he said honestly. "I hurt her very badly, but I'm going to try to make it right." That afternoon he went to the study. He didn't look for the ring. He started looking for something else. A clue, something he might have missed in his anger. He went through the security footage again, this time not looking for proof of guilt, but for proof of innocence. He slowed it down frame by frame. Amelia dusting, Amelia pausing in front of the ring, Amelia turning her back. And then he saw it. A tiny, almost imperceptible movement. Just as she turned, her hand, holding a dusting cloth, brushed against the edge of the glass dome. It wobbled slightly, so slightly he had missed it before. But it wobbled. His heart started to pound. He replayed it again and again. The dome was not sealed. He had always assumed it was, but it just rested on the pedestal. What if? What if the ring hadn't been stolen? What if it had simply fallen? He got down on his hands and knees, his expensive suit forgotten. He searched under the heavy mahogany desk, under the thick Persian rug. Nothing. He pulled the desk away from the wall. Still nothing. He was about to give up when his eyes landed on the ornate, old-fashioned radiator in the corner of the room, the kind with wide, decorative grates. He grabbed a flashlight from his desk drawer and shone it into the grate. And there, nestled in a bed of dust and cobwebs, something sparkled. A deep, impossible blue. The ring. It had rolled off the pedestal, across the floor, and fallen through the grate of the radiator. Elijah stared at it for a long, silent moment. The truth hit him with the force of a physical blow. Amelia was innocent, completely, utterly innocent, and he, in his arrogant suspicion, had destroyed her. He had accused an innocent woman, fired her, ruined her reputation, and left her to fend for herself on the streets, all while the proof of her innocence was sitting a few feet away, hidden by his own blindness. The weight of his actions crashed down on him, and for the first time since he was a boy who had lost his mother, Elijah Vance sat on the floor of his empty mansion and wept. The tears, when they finally subsided, left Elijah feeling hollowed out, raw, and strangely clear-headed. The guilt was a physical weight, a crushing pressure in his chest, but within it there was a single, sharp point of focus. He had to make this right, not just for his own conscience, but for Amelia, for Lily. He spent the rest of the day in a flurry of controlled, decisive action. The old Elijah Vance, the one who built empires and crushed competitors, was back, but his target was different now. His target was his own. His first call was to his head of security. "I want a full, discreet investigation into the leak about Ms. Hayes's dismissal," he commanded, his voice cold and clipped. "I want to know which agency spread the rumor, who they spoke to, and who paid them. I want names, dates, and evidence, and I want it on my desk by tomorrow morning." His second call was to a man named David Chen, a high-powered fixer in the city, the kind of person who specialized in reputation management. "David," Elijah said, "I have a situation. An innocent woman's reputation has been unfairly destroyed because of me. I need you to clean it up. I want every gossip blog, every agency newsletter, every whisper in a high society charity circle to receive a formal retraction. I want them to understand that Amelia Hayes is a woman of unimpeachable integrity and that any further slander will be met with the full force of my legal team, bear no expense." His third action was the most difficult. He walked into Lily's room that evening. She was sitting by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass, her back to him. "Lily," he said softly. She didn't turn. "I found the ring," he said. This time she turned, her eyes wide. "Where?" "It had fallen, under the radiator in the study. Amelia didn't take it, sweetie. It was an accident. I was wrong, completely and horribly wrong." Lily was silent for a long moment, processing the information. Then she asked the one question that mattered most. "So she can come home now?" Elijah's heart ached. "I don't know, Lily. I hurt her very badly. I accused her of something terrible. She might not want to come back, but I'm going to ask her, and I'm going to apologize." "You should bring her flowers," Lily said, her voice small. "She likes the yellow ones, the ones that look like little suns." "Daisies," Elijah whispered, remembering a time Amelia had pointed them out in the garden. "Yes, I will." Amelia knew nothing of the storm brewing in Elijah Vance's world. Her own world had shrunk to the quiet, modest, sterile hallways of the Seattle Children's Hospital and the cramped confines of her boarding house room. Her life found a new, exhausting rhythm. She would sleep during the day, her dreams filled with the phantom laughter of a little girl, and work through the night. The oncology ward was a universe of its own, a place of quiet beeps, hushed conversations, and incredible bravery. Amelia found her purpose there. She became the story lady. She would sit for hours by the bedsides of children who were too sick or too scared to sleep, her voice a soft, steady anchor in the dark. She read them tales of dragons and princesses, of talking animals and magical lands. She held their small, feverish hands. She sang lullabies when they cried. She wasn't a doctor or a nurse. She couldn't offer cures or medicine, but she could offer presence. She could offer comfort, and in that ward where every moment was precious, that was a powerful kind of medicine. The nurses quickly grew to, "You have a gift, Amelia," one of them, a kind woman named Sarah, told her one night. "What bot? You bring a sense of peace to this place." "This place brings peace to me, too," Amelia confessed. "It reminds me of what's important." She rarely thought about the Vance mansion. When she did, it was with a dull ache. She missed Lily with a ferocity that surprised her. She thought of Elijah too, but those thoughts were more complicated. The memory of his accusation was a fresh wound, but underneath it, she also remembered the look in his eyes when he spoke of his mother, the brief moments of vulnerability that had peeked through his armor. She felt a strange mix of anger and a sympathy she didn't want to acknowledge. One morning, as she was leaving the hospital after her shift, her phone, a cheap prepaid model she had bought, buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Sure, Amelia, this is Elijah Vance. I know I have no right to ask this, but I need to speak with you. It's important. Please, can we meet? Dashlation?" Her first instinct was to delete the message. What could he possibly have to say? But her curiosity, and a small, stubborn flicker of hope she couldn't extinguish, made her hesitate. She stood on the rain-slicked sidewalk, the early morning traffic rushing by, and typed a simple reply. "Quedo where?" The response was immediate. "The park across from the hospital. In 1 hour, Dover. Later." Elijah was already there when she arrived, sitting on a bench, looking out of place in his expensive coat. In his hands he held a small, slightly clumsy bouquet of yellow daisies. Amelia approached cautiously, wrapping her thin jacket tighter around herself. She sat on the opposite end of the bench, leaving a clear space between them. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice hoarse. "I almost didn't," she replied honestly. They sat in silence for a long moment, the sounds of the city waking up around them. "I found the ring," he said finally, not looking at her. "It had rolled under the radiator. It was my fault. The dome wasn't secure. You were innocent, and I was a fool." Amelia didn't respond. She just watched a flock of pigeons pecking at the ground nearby. "I am sorry, Amelia," he said, his voice thick with an emotion she had never heard from him before. "Those are just words, and I know they aren't enough. What I did was unforgivable. I accused you, I humiliated you, I threw you out of my home. I judged you based on my own bitter prejudices, and I was wrong, so deeply, devastatingly wrong." He finally turned to look at her, and she was shocked by what she saw in his eyes. The arrogance, the cold control, it was all gone. In its place was a raw, humbling shame. "I can't undo the pain I caused you," he continued, "but I am trying to fix the damage. I've issued a formal retraction to every agency in the city. My legal team is ensuring your reputation is cleared. The security chief who leaked the information has been fired, and Lily, she misses you terribly. We both do." He held out the bouquet of daisies. "Lily said these are your favorite." Amelia looked at the flowers, then at his face. She saw the exhaustion, the sleepless nights, the genuine remorse. A part of her, the part that had been hurt so badly, wanted to stay angry, to reject his apology and walk away. But another part, the part that had seen a glimmer of a good man beneath the armor, felt a wave of compassion. She slowly reached out and took the flowers. "Thank you," she whispered. "I want to offer you your job back," he said, his voice gaining a bit of hope. "Full back pay, a significant raise, a formal apology in front of the entire staff. Anything you want." Amelia held the daisies, their bright yellow a stark contrast to the gray morning. "I can't come back, Elijah." His face fell. "I understand, after what I did." "It's not just that," she said, finally meeting his eyes. "I've found something else, a new purpose." She told him about the hospital, about the children, about the feeling of being truly needed. "I can't leave them," she said simply. Elijah listened, a profound respect dawning on his face. Of course she had found a way to turn her own pain into a source of comfort for others. That was who she was. He had just been too blind to see it. "I understand," he said quietly, "but there must be something I can do to make amends." Amelia was silent for a moment, an idea taking shape in her mind, an idea that was bold, terrifying, and felt absolutely right. "There is one thing," she said. "Anything." "The hospital's pediatric ward is underfunded," she said, her voice gaining strength. The equipment is old, they're short-staffed, and they're trying to build a new wing for long-term patients and their families. They've been fundraising for years, but they're still millions of dollars short. She looked him straight in the eye. You want to make things right? Don't give me a raise. Give them a new wing, a real one, with the best equipment, comfortable rooms for the parents, and a playroom filled with books and toys. Elijah stared at her, completely taken aback. He had expected her to ask for money, for a settlement, for something for herself. Instead, she was asking for something for others, for sick children. Consider it done, he said without a moment's hesitation. We'll call it the Amelia Hayes Wing for Pediatric Care. Amelia shook her head. No, call it the Lily Vance Wing, in honor of a little girl who deserves a world full of kindness. Elijah felt a lump form in his throat. Even now, after everything, she was still thinking of his daughter. All right, he agreed, his voice thick. The Lily Vance Wing. And there's one more condition, Amelia added. Name it. You don't just write a check, she said, her gaze intense. You get involved. You come to the hospital. You meet the doctors, the nurses, the families. You see the faces of the people you're helping. You learn their stories. It was a challenge. She was asking him to step out of his world of spreadsheets and boardrooms and into a world of pain, hope, and raw humanity. It was the last thing the old Elijah Vance would have ever done. I'll be there tomorrow, the new Elijah Vance said. True to his word he was. The next day, Elijah walked into the Seattle Children's Hospital, not as a CEO, but as a volunteer. Doris, the head of volunteers, greeted him with a skeptical look, but Amelia had already paved the way. He's here to learn, Amelia had told her. Be patient with him. His first task was simple, organizing the toy closet. For a man used to organizing multi-million-dollar mergers, sorting through stuffed animals and board games was a humbling experience. He spent the next few days doing whatever was asked of him. He restocked supply closets. He delivered meals to the rooms. He read stories to the children when Amelia was busy. At first he was awkward, stiff. He didn't know how to talk to the kids, re-fall, how to handle the overwhelming sadness that sometimes permeated the ward. But he watched Amelia. He saw how she could make a child laugh with a silly voice, how she could comfort a crying parent with a simple touch on the arm, how she moved through the ward like a quiet beacon of light. Slowly he started to learn. He discovered he was surprisingly good at building complex Lego castles. He found that he could make a little boy named Sam forget about his next treatment by telling him stories about corporate takeovers, reframed as epic battles between dragon-led companies. The children, in turn, began to break down his walls. They didn't care that he was a billionaire. They just saw a tall man who told funny stories and was really good at building Lego towers. One afternoon, as he was reading to a little girl, she reached out and touched his hand. "You have nice hands," she said simply. "They're big and strong." Elijah looked at his own hands, the hands that had signed ruthless contracts and dismissed employees without a second thought, and he felt, for the first time, that they could be used for something else entirely. He and Amelia found a new rhythm, a quiet partnership built on a shared purpose. They worked side by side. Their conversations focused on the children, the new wing, the fundraising. The past was a silent ghost between them, acknowledged but not addressed. Elijah knew he couldn't rush it. He had to earn back her trust, one small, consistent action at a time. The groundbreaking ceremony for the Lily Vance wing was scheduled for a bright spring day. The hospital was buzzing with excitement. Media, donors, and hospital staff gathered in a courtyard decorated with balloons and banners. Elijah was supposed to give the keynote speech. He had a draft prepared by his PR team, full of corporate speak and impressive numbers. But as he stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd, he saw Amelia standing with a group of children, her face glowing with quiet joy, and he knew he couldn't read the prepared speech. He set the papers aside. "Good morning," he began, his voice clear and steady. Today, we're here to break ground on a new building, but we're also here to break ground on something more important, a new way of thinking. He told them about the importance of community, of empathy, of looking beyond a person's circumstances to see their true worth. He didn't mention Amelia by name, but everyone in the hospital who knew their story understood who he was talking about. True wealth, he concluded, his eyes finding Amelia's in the crowd, is not what you accumulate. It's what you give away. It's the lives you touch, the hope you inspire. And today, I am the wealthiest man in the world because I have finally learned what it means to be truly rich. The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, Amelia approached him, her eyes shining. "That was a beautiful speech, Elijah." "It was just the truth," he said, "a truth you taught me." They stood there for a moment, the unspoken feelings hanging between them. The wound was still there, but it was starting to heal. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to talk about the future. The groundbreaking ceremony, in the weeks that followed, the construction of the Lily Vance wing became a tangible symbol of a new beginning, not just for the hospital, but for Elijah and Amelia. They found themselves thrown together in planning meetings, fundraising calls, and site visits. Their interactions remained professional, but the undercurrent of shared purpose was undeniable. Elijah was a different man in these meetings. The ruthless CEO who once dominated boardrooms was replaced by a collaborative leader. He listened to the architects, deferred to the doctor's expertise, and most importantly, he listened to Amelia. Her insights into what families truly needed, not just medical facilities, but for spaces for rest, for play, for quiet contemplation, were integrated into the very blueprint of the building. She wasn't just a volunteer. She had become the heart of the project. One afternoon, they were in a heated discussion with the interior design team. The designers were proposing a sleek, minimalist aesthetic for the family waiting rooms. "It's clean, modern, and cost-effective," the lead designer argued. "It's also sterile and cold," Amelia countered gently. "These families are spending hours, sometimes days, waiting for news. They don't need to feel like they're in another corporate office. They need warmth. They need comfort." She suggested soft lighting, comfortable armchairs instead of rigid sofas, and a color palette of warm, earthy tones. The designer looked at Elijah, expecting him to side with the more professional option. "Amelia's right," Elijah said without hesitation. "Redo the proposal. Budget is not the primary concern here. Humanity is." The design team was stunned, but they complied. Watching him, Amelia felt a flicker of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time: admiration. He wasn't just performing for her, he was internalizing the lessons, he was genuinely changing. Their quiet partnership did not go unnoticed. The hospital staff saw it, the donors saw it, and most importantly, Lily saw it. Elijah had started bringing Lily to the hospital on weekends. At first, she was hesitant, the place holding memories of her own mother's final days. But seeing Amelia there transformed it. For Lily, wherever Amelia was a safe space. She would spend hours in the playroom with Amelia, drawing pictures to decorate the construction site fences. Elijah would watch them from the doorway, his heart a tangled mess of joy and regret. He saw the easy affection between them, the natural bond he had so recklessly broken. He saw Lily's real, uninhibited laughter, and it was a sound that was both beautiful and painful, a reminder of everything he had almost lost for good. "She loves you so much," he said to Amelia one Saturday, as they watched Lily teach a group of other children how to make paper cranes. "I love her too," Amelia replied softly, her eyes on the little girl. "She's an extraordinary child, Elijah, kind, resilient, and so full of light. She gets that from her grandmother," he said. Then he looked at Amelia. "And from you." The compliment hung in the air between them, simple and sincere. The wall between them was getting lower, the space less fraught with the ghosts of the past. The true test, however, came unexpectedly. The hospital was hosting its annual charity gala, a major fundraising event to support its programs. The new wing was the centerpiece of the evening. As the project's lead donor and lead volunteer coordinator, Elijah and Amelia were expected to attend. "I don't have anything to wear for something like that," Amelia said immediately when Elijah told her. The memory of the last gala she had attended with him, and the humiliation that followed, was still a fresh scar. "I know," he said gently. "That's why I didn't assume you would go. But they're honoring the volunteers, Amelia. They're honoring you. You deserve to be there." He handed her a simple white envelope. "This is not a command, it's an invitation. And if you decide to go, this is for you." Inside the envelope was a gift card to a high-end boutique with a handwritten note, "Wear whatever makes you feel like yourself. That's always the most beautiful thing in the room. Rye." Amelia wrestled with the decision for days. A part of her wanted to hide, to avoid the world of gowns and forced smiles. But another part, a stronger part, the part that had faced down her own fears in the lonely hospital nights, knew she couldn't. She had to go, not for Elijah, but for herself, to prove that she wouldn't let the past dictate her future. She didn't use the gift card. Instead, she went to a small, independent designer she had discovered, a young woman who worked with sustainable fabrics. Together, they designed a dress. It was simple, elegant, a pale blue that reminded her of a clear morning sky. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about feeling comfortable in her own skin. The night of the gala, the ballroom was a sea of black ties and glittering jewels. Elijah stood near the entrance, greeting donors, his posture confident, but his eyes kept flicking toward the door. He didn't know if she would come. He didn't know if she would come. And then he saw her. She walked in, and it was like the entire noisy room went quiet in his head. She wasn't wearing a dramatic gown or flashy diamonds. She was just Amelia, radiant, serene, and so beautiful it made his breath catch. She saw him across the room and gave a small, nervous smile. He walked toward her, his path clearing as if by magic. "Amelia," he said, his voice a little rough. "You came." "I came," she confirmed, her smile growing more confident. "You look," he started, then stopped, remembering her past aversion to his comments. "It's okay," she said softly. "You can say it." "You look breathtaking," he finished, his eyes sincere. "Thank you," she said, a faint blush on her cheeks. "You don't look so bad yourself, Mr. Vance." For the first time, they walked into a formal event, not as a boss and an accused employee, but as partners, equals. Throughout the evening, people came up to congratulate them on the new wing. They moved through the crowd with an easy grace, finishing each other's sentences, their rapport obvious to everyone. The highlight of the evening was the award ceremony for the volunteers. When Amelia's name was called, a warm, genuine applause filled the room. She walked to the stage, her composure steady. "Thank you," she began, looking out at the crowd. "When I started volunteering here, I was at one of the lowest points in my life. I felt lost and invisible. But this place, these children, these families, they showed me that the greatest value in life isn't in what we have, but in what we give." She paused, her gaze finding Elijah's. "And they taught me about the power of second chances. Not just for buildings, but for people. Thank you." She walked off the stage to another round of thunderous applause. Elijah was waiting for her, his eyes shining with an emotion he no longer tried to hide. "You are truly remarkable, Amelia Hayes," he said, his voice full of admiration. "I had a good teacher," she replied, her eyes twinkling. "You learn a lot about resilience when you're trying to prove a stubborn billionaire wrong." He laughed, a real, deep laugh that reached his eyes. "Is that what you were doing?" "Maybe a little," she admitted. Later, the band started playing a slow waltz. Couples filled the dance floor. Elijah turned to Amelia, a hesitant look on his face. "May I have this dance?" he asked, extending his hand. She looked at his outstretched hand, then into his eyes. And this time, she didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said, placing her hand in his. "You may." He led her onto the floor, pulling her gently into his arms. They moved together, their steps fitting perfectly. It wasn't like the awkward, stiff dance of a man trying to perform a duty. It was the easy, natural movement of two people who were finally in sync. "I never thought I'd be here," she confessed, her head resting lightly on his shoulder. "Neither did I," he admitted, his hand tightening slightly on her waist. "Amelia, there's something I need to ask you." She looked up at him, her heart starting to beat a little faster. The night I accused you," he started, his voice low and pained. "You said I was seeing what I wanted to see. What did you mean by that?" The question hung between them, a final ghost that needed to be laid to rest. Amelia took a deep breath. "That night, after Lily went to bed, I did go into the study. I saw the ring, and it was so beautiful it reminded me of a story my own mother used to tell me about a star that fell from the sky." She paused. "I picked up the glass dome just for a second to see it better, to see the details up close." Elijah's eyes widened with a new understanding. "So when you turned your back to the camera—" "I was holding the dome," she confirmed. "When I put it back, it must have wobbled and knocked the ring off the pedestal. I didn't even notice. I was so lost in the memory of my mother. I never would have dreamed." He stopped dancing, standing still in the middle of the crowded floor, looking down at her. "So, you didn't even know it was gone." Not until the next morning," she finished softly. He closed his eyes for a moment, the final piece of his self-delusion crumbling into dust. He hadn't just been wrong. He had been willfully blind, building a narrative of betrayal out of his own fear. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" he asked, his voice filled with regret. "Would you have believed me?" she asked simply. And he knew the honest answer was no. The old Elijah wouldn't have. He would have twisted it into more proof of her deceit. "No," he said, his voice raw, "I wouldn't have, and that is my greatest failure." "It's in the past now, Elijah," she said, her voice full of a grace he knew he didn't deserve. "No," he said, opening his eyes and looking at her with a fierce intensity. "It's not, because every day that I wake up and I'm not with you is a continuation of that failure. I don't want to live in the past anymore, Amelia. I want to build a future. With you." Amelia's heart was pounding. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was for her alone, "that I am hopelessly, irrevocably in love with you. I fell in love with your strength, your compassion, your dignity. I love the way you see the world. I love the way you've taught me to see the world. And I know I have a lifetime of amends to make, but I want to spend that lifetime making them with you." Tears welled in Amelia's eyes. She had thought her heart was guarded, that she was protecting herself. But she realized, in that moment, that she had fallen in love with him too, with the man who learned to build Lego castles, who read stories to sick children, who had the courage to face his own demons and become better for it. "I love you too, Elijah," she whispered. He pulled her closer, and there, in the middle of a crowded ballroom, he kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of passion or desperation. It was a kiss of homecoming, a kiss that promised a new beginning, a real beginning, built not on a foundation of suspicion, but on a foundation of hard-won trust and a love that had proven to be stronger than any wall he could ever build. The gala wasn't just an ending, it was an explosive beginning. The story of the reclusive billionaire and the compassionate volunteer became the talk of Seattle's philanthropic circle. But for Elijah and Amelia, the world outside the bubble of that ballroom dance floor didn't matter. What mattered was the quiet, terrifying, and exhilarating reality of what came next. The drive home from the gala was a world away from their first painful car rides. This time, their hands were linked over the center console, a simple connection that felt more solid than any business contract. "I still can't quite believe this is real," Amelia said. looking at their joined hands. "Get used to it," Elijah replied, his voice laced with a playful warmth she was coming to adore. "I have no intention of letting you go, ever again." When they arrived at the mansion, the house was dark and silent. Lily was spending the night with a friend. For the first time, Elijah and Amelia were truly alone in the vast space, not as a boss and an employee, but as two people in love. "Can I show you something?" he asked, leading her not towards the grand living room, but towards his private study. She tensed slightly, the memory of his accusation still a faint shadow. He sensed it immediately. "It's okay," he said gently, squeezing her hand. "We're rewriting the story of this room." He didn't turn on the main lights, just a small, warm lamp on his desk. He walked over to the pedestal where the sapphire ring had once sat. Now, in its place, was the clumsy bouquet of daisies he had given her in the park, perfectly preserved under the glass dome. "I kept them," he said simply, "to remind me of the day I started to wake up." Amelia felt a lump form in her throat. It was the most romantic gesture she had ever witnessed. "Elijah," she whispered. "I have something else for you," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the sapphire ring. He didn't put it on the pedestal, he held it out to her. "This ring doesn't belong under glass, like a museum piece. It belongs to a woman who embodies everything my mother stood for: kindness, strength, and a heart full of love. It belongs to you, Amelia, if you'll have it." Tears streamed down her face as he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "It's not an engagement ring," he clarified quickly. "Not yet. I'm not asking you to marry me tonight. I know I still have a lot to earn. Think of it as a promise that my heart, like this ring, is yours." "It's the most beautiful promise I've ever received," she said. Her voice choked with emotion. She threw her arms around his neck, and he held her tight, the silence of the study filled with the feeling of two broken pieces finally fitting together to make a new, more beautiful whole. Navigating their new reality was like learning a new dance. There were moments of perfect harmony and moments where they stepped on each other's toes. Elijah, a man used to solitude and control, had to learn how to share his life. Amelia, a woman used to fighting her battles alone, had to learn how to accept help and lean on someone else. Their first challenge was telling Lily. They sat her down the next day in the sunny breakfast nook. "Lily Bug," Elijah began, his voice uncharacteristically nervous. "Amelia and we're going to be together now. Not just as friends, but as a couple." Lily looked from her father to Amelia, her big blue eyes trying to understand. Like in the movies where people kiss?" "Exactly like that," Amelia said, smiling gently. Lily's face broke into a radiant smile. "Does that mean Amelia is coming home for good?" "Yes, sweetie," Elijah confirmed, his heart swelling. "She's coming home." Lily let out a squeal of pure joy and launched herself into Amelia's arms. "I knew it. I knew you were my dad's real-life princess." Watching them, laughing and hugging, Elijah felt a sense of peace he hadn't known was possible. This was what a family was supposed to feel like. Amelia moving into the mansion was a project in itself. She arrived with 2 suitcases and 3 boxes of books. Elijah had offered to buy her a whole new wardrobe, but she had politely refused. "I like my clothes," she'd said. "They have stories." So, her thrift store blouses hung in the cavernous walk-in closet next to his designer suits, a perfect metaphor for their two worlds colliding. She filled the sterile, minimalist rooms with plants, with colorful throws, and with the sound of her soft humming. Slowly, the cold mansion began to feel like a warm, vibrant home. Their work at the hospital continued, but now as a unified force. They were a formidable team. Elijah's business acumen and vast resources, combined with Amelia's on-the-ground empathy and deep understanding of the community's needs, made the Lily Vance Wing project a model of efficiency and compassion. He learned to see the people behind the spreadsheets. He would spend afternoons in the playroom, not as a billionaire donor, but just as Elijah, the guy who was really good at building Lego spaceships. He learned the names of the nurses, the doctors, and the families. He listened to their stories not with pity, but with a genuine desire to understand. Amelia, in turn, learned to step into her own power. She sat in on board meetings, no longer as a silent observer, but as a respected voice. She presented her ideas with a quiet confidence that won over even the most skeptical board members. She was a natural leader, and with Elijah's unwavering support, she thrived. But it wasn't always easy. Old habits died hard. One evening, Elijah came home from a frustrating day at the office, his mood dark and withdrawn. He retreated to his study, closing the door, shutting her out just like he used to. Amelia felt a pang of old fear. Was this it? Was he reverting to the cold, distant man he used to be? She took a deep breath, knocked on the door, and walked in without waiting for an invitation. He was standing by the window, his back to her. "Tough day?" she asked gently. "You wouldn't understand," he muttered. "It's business." "Try me," she said, crossing her arms. He sighed and turned around, his face a mask of stress. "We're trying to acquire a smaller biotech firm. They have a promising new technology, but the negotiations are falling apart. Their CEO is being unreasonable." "What does he want?" "More money, more control. The usual." "Maybe it's not about money," Amelia suggested. "Maybe it's about his legacy. Is it a family company?" Elijah blinked. "Yes, his father started it." "Then he's not just selling a company, he's selling his father's dream," she said. "He's afraid of letting it go, of letting his father down." Don't approach him as a CEO trying to make a deal. Approach him as a son who understands the weight of a legacy. Elijah stared at her, a look of dawning realization on his face. He had been so focused on the numbers, he had completely missed the human element. "How do you do that?" he asked, genuinely amazed. "How do you always see the story behind the story?" "Because for most of my life the story was all I had," she replied softly. He walked over to her and pulled her into his arms. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair, "for shutting you out. I'm still learning how to do this." "Say trust." "I know," she said, her voice muffled against his chest. "Me too, but we're learning together." Their relationship blossomed in the small, everyday moments. In the way he started leaving a cup of coffee on her nightstand every morning, just how she liked it. In the way she would leave a new book on his desk with a note saying, "Thought you'd find this interesting." Hadn't they learned each other's rhythms, each other's fears, each other's joys? He learned that she hated olives, that she could quote entire passages from classic literature from memory, and that she had a ridiculously infectious laugh. She learned that he was a surprisingly good cook, that he secretly loved old black and white movies, and that he had a soft spot for stray animals. Their love story wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was a quiet, steady construction, built on a foundation of mutual respect and a shared commitment to being better for themselves and for each other. The Lily Vance wing opened on a sunny day in early fall. The state-of-the-art facility was a testament to their shared vision. It was beautiful, functional, and most importantly, it felt like a place of hope. During the opening ceremony, the hospital administrator gave a moving speech, thanking all the donors. But then he did something unexpected. "While Mr. Vance's generosity made this possible," he said, "it was the vision and heart of one person that truly shaped this project. She is the soul of this new wing. Please join me in thanking Amelia Hayes." The entire crowd rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Amelia, sitting in the front row, was completely taken aback. She looked at Elijah, who was beaming with a pride that was so pure it brought tears to her eyes. He had arranged the whole thing without telling her. It was his way of publicly restoring the dignity he had once so carelessly taken from her. Later that day, as they walked through the new, sunlit hallways of the wing, he took her hand. "There's one more thing," he said, his voice serious. "What is it?" He led her to the entrance of the new playroom, a beautiful, bright space filled with books and art supplies. Above the door, a polished wooden sign read, "The Amelia Hayes Reading Nook." Custer. "Elijah," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "you didn't have to." "Yes, I did," he said, turning to face her. "I want every child who comes through these doors to know the name of the woman who fought for them, the woman who reminded us all that kindness is the most powerful medicine there is." He took a deep breath, his blue eyes intense. "I've waited. I've tried to earn it. And now I have to ask. Amelia Hayes, you are the story of my life. Will you marry me?" She laughed through her tears, the sound echoing in the quiet hallway. "You already gave me your mother's ring. Isn't that an engagement?" "That was a promise," he said, his voice dropping to a husky whisper. "This is the question, the only question that matters." "Yes," she said, her voice full of a joy so profound it felt like it could light up the entire hospital. "Yes, Elijah Vance, I will marry you." He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, a deep, celebratory kiss right there in the middle of the hallway of the building they had built together. It was a kiss that sealed not just a promise, but a future filled with Lego castles, bedtime stories, and a love that had risen from the ashes of mistrust, stronger and more beautiful than either of them could have ever imagined. The wedding of Elijah Vance and Amelia Hayes was the most talked-about event in Seattle, not because of its extravagance, but because of its profound simplicity. They chose not to have it at a grand hotel or a historic cathedral. Instead, they were married in the newly opened garden of the Lily Vance Wing at the Children's Hospital, surrounded by the very people whose lives they had touched. The guest list was a beautiful, eclectic mix. Hospital staff, families of patients, members of the board who had witnessed Elijah's transformation, and Amelia's small but fiercely loyal circle of friends, including Doris, the volunteer coordinator, who had given her a chance. And, of course, Lily, who served as both the flower girl and the maid of honor, a dual role she took with the utmost seriousness. Amelia wore the dress she had designed with the young, independent designer, the pale blue gown that reminded Elijah of a clear morning sky. It was her symbol of quiet defiance and self-worth. In her hands, she carried a simple bouquet of yellow daisies, picked that morning from the hospital's garden by Lily. Elijah waited for her, under a simple archway of climbing roses. He wore a classic black tuxedo, but his usual corporate stiffness was gone, replaced by a soft, open expression of pure happiness. As Amelia walked down the grassy aisle, their eyes met, and in that shared gaze was a story of forgiveness, redemption, and a love that had weathered the fiercest of storms. "Dearly beloved," began the hospital chaplain, a woman with a kind and gentle voice, "we are gathered here today not just to witness a marriage, but to celebrate a miracle, the miracle of two hearts finding their way back to each other, and in doing so, creating a legacy of hope for so many." They exchanged vows they had written themselves. Elijah's voice was thick with emotion as he spoke. "Amelia," he said, his hands holding hers, "you walked into my life and dismantled the fortress I had built around my heart. You did it not with force, but with a quiet, unwavering kindness. You taught me that vulnerability is not a weakness, but the truest measure of strength. You saw a man worth saving when all I saw was a man who had lost his way. I promise to spend every day of my life trying to be worthy of the incredible love you've shown me. I promise to listen, to trust, and to always see the story behind the story. I love you." When it was Amelia's turn, tears were already shining in her eyes. "Elijah," she began, her voice soft but steady, "you saw me at my lowest, when I felt invisible to the world. You made a mistake, a terrible one, but what came after was a testament to the good man I always sensed was there. You taught me that forgiveness is not about forgetting, but about choosing to believe in someone's capacity to change. You have become my partner, my best friend, and my greatest champion. I promise to build a life with you filled with laughter, with compassion, and with an endless supply of daisies. I love you." When they were pronounced husband and wife, Lily let out a joyous whoop, tossing the remaining flower petals into the air. The small crowd erupted in heartfelt applause. Their first kiss as a married couple was long, sweet, and full of the promise of a peaceful future. The reception was a simple, joyful affair held in the hospital cafeteria, which had been transformed with fairy lights and wildflowers. Instead of a gourmet five-course meal, there was a buffet of comfort food. Instead of a string quartet, a local jazz band, one of whose members had a child treated at the hospital, played soulful music that filled the room with warmth. The most moving moment of the evening came during the toasts. After a few friends had spoken, Lily, holding a microphone that was almost as big as she was, stood on a chair. "My daddy used to be sad a lot," she said, her clear, childish voice cutting through the quiet chatter. "His eyes were like a rainy day. But then Amelia came, and now his eyes look like the sky after the rain stops." She turned to Amelia. "Thank you for bringing the sun back to our house." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Elijah pulled his daughter into a fierce hug, his own tears hidden in her hair. Married life was an adventure in beautiful normalcy. They built a home together in the vast mansion, filling its empty spaces with life. Amelia's sister, whose medical care was now fully managed by a team of the best specialists, became a regular visitor, her laughter joining Lily's in the once silent hallways. Elijah discovered the simple joy of Saturday morning pancakes, of building messy forts in the living room, and of reading bedtime stories until his voice grew hoarse. He learned that true strength wasn't in closing a deal, but in being present for his family. He sold his tech empire, keeping only a small venture capital firm that focused exclusively on funding ethical, socially responsive. His new life's work wasn't about accumulating wealth, but about investing in people. Amelia found her calling. She didn't just volunteer at the hospital anymore. With Elijah's full support, she went back to school, getting her master's in social work. She became the official director of the Lily Vance Wing, expanding its programs and becoming a fierce advocate for patient families. She had found her power, not in high fashion or corporate boardrooms, but in service to others. Their love was not a fiery, dramatic passion. It was a quiet, steady flame. It was in the way he would bring her a cup of tea without her asking when she was studying late. It was in the way she would leave a book on his pillow, knowing it was a story he would love. It was in the long, comfortable silences they could share, sitting on the porch watching the sunset, no words needed. One evening, about a year after their wedding, they were tucking Lily into bed. "Tell me the story again," Lily pleaded. "The one about the ring." Elijah and Amelia exchanged a smile. It had become Lily's favorite bedtime story. "Once upon a time," Elijah began, his voice a low rumble, "there was a very foolish king who lived in a big castle. He thought his greatest treasure was a beautiful sapphire ring." "But it wasn't," Lily interrupted excitedly. "No, it wasn't," Amelia continued, picking up the story. "His real treasure was a little princess with a heart full of sunshine, but the king was too busy being grumpy to notice." "Until a kind lady came," Lily added. "Until a kind and very patient lady came," Elijah corrected, winking at Amelia. "She taught the king that the ring was just a pretty stone, but that the love for his princess, and the love he could share with others, was the real treasure. It was a treasure that could never be lost or stolen." "And they all lived happily ever after," Lily finished, her eyelids growing heavy. "Yes, sweetie," Amelia whispered, kissing her forehead. "They really did." They watched their daughter drift off to sleep, her face peaceful in the soft glow of the nightlight. They walked out of the room hand in hand, and stood on the balcony, looking up at the star. "She was right, you know," Elijah said quietly. Who was? Amelia Hayes, the wise nanny, he said, turning to her and pulling her into his arms. The one who told me that a story is the most valuable thing, and ours is my favorite. She smiled, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady, reassuring beat of his heart. Mine too, she said. The past was not forgotten. Its scars remained, a quiet reminder of the pain they had overcome. But they were no longer wounds. They were part of the tapestry of their life, a testament to their journey from suspicion to trust, from loneliness to a love so profound it had not only healed them, but had created a legacy of hope that would touch countless other lives. They had found their happily ever after, not in a fairy tale, but in the beautiful, messy, and miraculous reality they had built together. What did you think of the journey of Elijah and Amelia on a scale of lean to sure? How would you rate their story? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And for everyone who has followed this story to its happy conclusion, who believes in the power of forgiveness and second chances, please comment with a simple redemption. We love knowing you are with us on this journey. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that will touch your heart.